Hi, everyone. I just want to welcome you to our webinar today, Preparing for PIAAC. My name is Allison Mullen. I'm the Manager of Communications and Marketing here at Essential Skills Ontario. Before we get started, I just want to give you a few instructions. At the right-hand side of your screen is your dashboard. There you can ask questions in the question pane. If it's a technical question, I'll try to answer and assist you throughout the webinar. If it's a question pertaining to the topic, feel free to ask at any time, and Ron will address them at the end of the webinar during the question and answer period. And if you'd like to participate on Twitter, just use the hashtag ESOWeb. So now to introduce our presenter today. Ron Sampson is a researcher at Essential Skills Ontario. He brings a passion to the field of workforce development and is interested in advancing Ontario and Canada's training system through innovation. During his time here at Essential Skills Ontario, Ron has done writing and background research for numerous reports, including Uncharted Territory, Can Social Innovation Revitalize Literacy and Essential Skills Programs, ESO State of the Art Series, and Realizing Local Workforce Potential through Workforce Planning Boards and Regional Literacy Networks. And his latest work is focused on career ladders and place-based strategies. So, Ron, on to you.
Hi, everybody. I hope you are in for an exciting or riveting presentation on a survey. And I'd like to start off by just saying that this is a survey. PIAAC is a survey, an international survey. And what I'd like to say is I wouldn't regularly say that a survey is brave and ambitious. Most people think of someone being brave and ambitious as climbing Kilimanjaro, doing very motivational or inspiring things. But the fact that we're able to capture the skill sets and human capital levels across 26 countries is a giant accomplishment. And the fact to just get agreement on 26 countries to agree to actually take part in a survey is a huge endeavor. And the more I've kind of done my research on PIAAC, the more I've gone to appreciate the vastness of it and how much effort and dedication is to create such a large tool. So I hope throughout this presentation that you gather a kind of appreciation for how big and how comprehensive this tool is. So now I'm going to begin with this. So who we are, we basically always start off with who Essential Skills Ontario is. So basically through a strategic approach, Essential Skills conducts research to discover and promote innovative ideas and strategies to deliver results to Ontario. Now why do we do this? Because people count. And we know that our most vulnerable citizens need the training and support to move into employment and fulfill the lives that they want to live. We know that the first job is the first step to a sustainable livelihood. So what are we doing? We're exploring what works for whom, where, and why. Recently, Essential Skills Ontario is conducting a variety of initiatives or taking part in a variety of initiatives so we can discover more about how do we make things more effective, how can we make it for specific people, how does it incur within a context or in a location, and how are we going to improve the overall systematic level, the program level, from head to toe. So in terms of PIAAC, I'd like to start off about technology and skills. I think we live in a world where we all know that technology is a huge factor, right? We live in a world where innovation is accelerating, productivity is increasing, and technology is really transforming our economy and employment. We know that it's not simply a factor that we cannot exclude anymore. So we ask these questions always. Well, when it comes to technology, how is technology changing jobs and the demand for skills? How is technology changing the lives of low-skilled workers? How is technology changing opportunities for employment? And how is technology really changing the definition of literacy? And how is technology changing training? A while before, Essential Skills Ontario released Menial No More, and we really saw that technology is impacting the lives of lower skilled individuals and that the jobs, or the traditional jobs that people enter, don't exist. So this has been a passion of ours for some time, and PIAAC is a survey tool that actually builds off of, not our work, but has been building on the entire gamut of human capital and the entire gamut of skill sets. So we really find the information and the research very interesting. Now, in around 2003, Frank Levy, with a bunch of researchers, conducted a a report, or produced a report called The Skill Content of Recent Technological Change, an Empirical Exploration. What they did is they wanted to graph the job tasks for over a 480-year period and see how they're changing. Based on their analysis using a dictionary occupational titles, basically your NOC codes in Canada, they're able to see that there was consistent patterns emerging and that certain skills are being used or increasingly being used in our economy and others weren't. As you can see from this chart here from 1960 to 2002, what they've been able to graph is that routine tasks, the ones that we traditionally assume around, people putting in a rivet or kind of things, have all been automated, and that the new jobs or new skills are increasingly relying on complex communication and complex problem-solving skills, or what they would call in this one, non-routine analytical skills and non-routine interactive skills. So when we take a step back, we can actually see that, it's not over a long period that this is an emerging pattern and it's not going away. Another thing we should note, that this is just a changing mix of jobs. It didn't articulate what was occurring within jobs. So when we look at actually one of Frank Levy's later books, The New Division of Labor, where they documented case studies of how jobs were changing within, how skills were changing within jobs, we saw that this may be this chart may be underestimating the issue. If we look at a call center job, or they did a stockbroker and they did a doctor, the skills that people are using are increasingly growing within occupations. And we know this from new automotive positions that are opening up. Nobody is doing routine tasks anymore. Routine tasks have been automated by technology. And what we see, this relates to the kind of employment rates based on educational attainment. There's a secular trend emerging. People with high school, people with less than a high school attainment are increasingly finding it more difficult to find employment. Over the last 20 years, or from 1991 to 2011, we see that every year almost a 2% decrease happens for their employment rate, aggregately. And this projection is only going to continue. Some people are saying that, in the next 25 years, that over 70% of people will need a post-secondary degree to participate in the economy. So we know that people need more skills, they need to upgrade. And we also know that there's about this 10 to 15% of the population without a high school certificate. We also see that this is a chart, I know it's a bad chart, but about occupational changes in Canada. We see a similar thing, that repetitive, routine, or manual jobs are diminishing. And that would be basically, in this thing it says production jobs, farming jobs, and clerical jobs. And that professional sales and service jobs, which require complex communication skills and complex problem solving, are increasing. We also know that even the jobs in these kind of production or farming or clerical positions, they're not the same positions that existed 20 years ago. So even to enter into those occupations, you need higher levels of skills. And we see this particularly in the food processing sector and automotive manufacturing. So over the last 2 years, people have been trying to explain or come up with words to define these kind of changes in this ITC environment that we live in. Information, to put that, but information communication technologies. So one term that people describe is digital literacy. And increasingly this word is used to describe, are you able to navigate social media and other personal digital devices? Can you roll Facebook? Can you do this? And know your way around it. Another increasingly used term is STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and math. And that's mainly a large times used to describe certain industries or occupations or programs that people study. There's been huge STEM movements to get kids into these kind of fields of study or these kind of occupations in the U.S., in Canada, and in other countries around the world. Then there's problem-solving and technology-rich environments. This I'll discuss more in detail, but that's based on kind of Levy's analysis of the abilities to use technology to solve problems using technological devices. I'll get more into that. And then there's a term that economists use called skills bias technological change. And it basically describes that recent technological change is skills bias. It favors skilled over unskilled labor. There's a premium in the labor market for specific skills or higher skills. and this trend looks like it's going to continue. So now we get to the survey, because I like giving a bit of background information about these kind of changes before we say, well, how did PIAAC or why did IELTS make these changes? Because we know that there's changes in the market, in our society, and we know that technological changes is so massive that we have to kind of build this into the new survey tool on how we understand literacy, numeracy, and problem solving in the 21st century. So let me just describe about IELTS and PIAAC. Well, we all know that they're kind of literacy surveys, and PIAAC is more of a human capital survey, but why is it different? And we look back, or we look at the data that we're still using from 2003. It's a world of Jean Chrétien, Britney Spears, and Nokia phones were the largest selling phones in the world, and the flip phone was the most innovative aspect of cell phone technology. The iPhone wouldn't come out for the next 4 years. Netflix boasted its first profit, but that was mainly through mail services and kiosks. The world of 2013 is a different place. So this survey is supposed to keep up with these changes, adapt. I'm fairly new to the literacy field, but it's funny, my boss, John, he talks about when they added numeracy into the literacy field, and everybody was up in arms if numeracy should be included into literacy. And now we look back at it, and then, of course, numeracy should be included. And hopefully, or maybe problem-solving in technology-rich environments will be something like numeracy. We understand that we are navigating cell phones, that we're working continuously on computers, that we have to solve problems on an instant basis. And this is really actually becoming more and more an element of our daily lives. So what will PIAAC do? PIAAC will provide international benchmark of adult competencies. It'll assess adults' literacy, numeracy skills, as well as their ability to solve problem-solving in technology-rich environments. It'll also focus on key cognitive and workplace skills that are required for successful participation in the economy and society. The two new elements of PIAAC are the survey of skills used at work, which includes this JRH approach, which I'll come to later, and this problem-solving in technology-rich environments. PIAAC will also provide Ontario with a broader understanding of where, as a province, we stand in skills and human capital development. Also, PIAAC is linked with other OECD surveys, such as PISA, which measures the scholastic performance of pupils, age 15. Right? It follows that completion of initial education, how they go in the workforce, and how do the skills evolve. So PIAAC in Canada. I guess PIAAC results are coming out October 4th, if I didn't mention it. But why is PIAAC so interesting in Canada? Canada has the largest survey sample. More than any other country, we'll be able to find out, we'll be able to see the skills portraits throughout populations, provinces, and throughout the whole country. We specifically oversampled recent immigrants, Aboriginal populations, second language learners, second language speakers, and youth. These samples will be able to give us really in-depth information about how the different populations are doing in terms of skills and human capital development. I mean, if we look at the U.S., which is a much larger country, right, they're only sampling 5,000 people, so you'll only be able to get U.S. data. You won't be able to understand how Hispanics are doing in skill levels, how certain states are doing. So in Canada, we'll be really able to see how Ontario is doing. We'll even be able to see how cities and other areas are doing, so we can really see if there's actually skill differences within areas. So again, we talk about building on the work of previous surveys. If I refer back to this kind of Nokia flip phone versus the iPhone, this is kind of compared to the last survey. This is an iPhone compared to Nokia flip phone. It's much more comprehensive. It'll measure problem solving and technology. It looks at how skills are utilized in the workforce. And there's another important thing with about low literacy levels. In previous OECD surveys, they weren't able to go at the really low levels, and they basically had a level 1. This will be able to differentiate it between if you have level 1 skills or you don't. So really be able to see how many people don't even have the basic building blocks to read effectively, which is really important. So now I'm going to go into the core dimensions of problem solving in technology-rich environments. Now, one thing we should know about problem solving is that solving problems, although we do it every day, is a very complicated issue. We do it intuitively all the time, but when we take back and say, how do you actually solve a problem? You first have to identify what the problem is. Then you have to know kind of what the potential causes could be. And then you have to say, well, how can I solve these problems? right? I mean, every day we go about solving problems kind of like a doctor. We take in information, we diagnose the issue, and then we try to solve it. I mean, it's maybe not as complicated as a doctor, but we do this regularly. And then, is the problem open or closed? Is there a variety of answers, or is there one specific answer? And the test items in PIAAC are actually designed to test this. It's not designed to test digital literacy or digital fluency. It's really just designed to see what are the cognitive skills you have to solve these problems. Now, there's 3 levels of this, rather than the 5 in the other components of the PIAAC survey. And also, basically, because it is using technology, it will be able to measure if you know how to use technology or you don't. I actually recently, they have the PIAAC Online is coming out, and I tried some of the test items, or you'll be able to get, because they're norming the assessment tool. And I took some of the questions, and they're really engaging and interesting, and it's like solving a puzzle. And they're open-ended questions about asking the legitimacy of a source, and how do we know if this is a correct answer, or how would you know that this source is correct, or how would you go about solving all kinds of problems, and how would you go about navigating certain websites and finding information on another website. So it's really, it's actually a lot of fun. If you're interested in, I would go and get some, and want to learn more about the test items, you can actually take the practice trials on PIAAC Online. So then the other component is let me go back. So basically, they've divided the problem-solving and technology-rich environments by 3 elements: the technology, the cognitive dimensions, and the problem statement. So how you go, what is the statement, what is the problem, and because it's online, they're all using a web application. So then you'd have to navigate certain websites, bring down filters, conduct a bunch of items to actually solve this problem. So, and the other interesting thing is that through problem-solving and technology-rich environments, we'll be able to understand the relationship between problem-solving and technology-rich environments and the relationship to literacy, numeracy, and this topic, the skills used at work. So, increasingly, we know that people who are the further away we are from school, most of us, the classroom is actually our workspace, and we learn new skills or existing ones, and we develop our skills. We also know that skills are like any other muscle. We either use them or quite lose them. So we have to almost, in this survey, we wanted to, the OECD wanted to find out of how the skills and the types and levels of use of the skills in the workplace relate to your kind of other assessment scores. So this is a self-administered self-questionnaire where it kind of asks you about the generic skills in your workplace, how frequently you use them, what's the intensity, and then it's able to decide what's the skills, if you're in a skills surplus or skills deficiency, and how your educational attainment relates and how your skill levels relate to kind of what you're doing in the workforce. Based on old data, which from a previous survey they looked at, about 23% of people were in a skills deficit situation in terms of what they were doing at the work, and about 15% were in a skills surplus. So it's really interesting to know how people are utilizing skills on a daily basis, because we talk about training people. We have to train people for what skills are going to be used in the workplace. So it's interesting to know, or just to say, what skills people are actually using versus what we think people are using. So the OECD through this are using a JRA model. And the JRA model is called the Job Requirements Approach. And they've been using this in a variety of countries all over the world. I think Italy used it in one of the surveys. The U.S. through ONET is using it. And it's a way of understanding what skills are used in a job. It's a framework. And it breaks down into kind of 4 core areas: the cognitive skills that people use in a job, the interactive skills, that kind of communication, complex communication skills, the physical skills, and the social skills. So in this kind of the survey of skills used in the workplace, they will ask specific skills on how people use them in the workplace. How intense they are, the frequency, the use. So this information will be really interesting, and basically Canada, with its large sample size, will be able to see how skills are used in different jobs or in different locations or in different places or amongst different populations in the workplace. So I want to say about we have some kind of interim indicators about what we know is happening. So what do we know based on these skills surveys? On previous ones, and emerging evidence coming out of PIAAC. We know that low levels of foundational skills are systematically overrepresented, or people with low levels of foundational skills are systematically overrepresented at the bottom end of the income distribution. We know that people who have low levels on multiple and literacy, numeracy, are more likely to be unemployed, have lower incomes, and are more likely to be receiving some form of social assistance. It's not a causation. There's higher probabilities of having low levels of skills and being at a social and economic disadvantage. In terms of social disadvantage, we know that people with low levels of skills are overly represented, no, not overly represented, are more likely to not participate in social clubs, have poor health status, are not engaging in society frequently, have a poor understanding of political issues, and so on. We also know that if you don't, again, we get back to skills and as a muscle, we know that there's an atrophy of skills used. We know that over age, skills naturally diminish. But people who are less likely to use their skills, they diminish faster. So we look at older populations, and that's, I guess, very important to Canada with a large baby boom population. If they're not using their skills, they diminish quicker. So if we are using our skills, we can delay or lessen the atrophy of skills. And that means we can increase our social and economic participation in the workforce and society. We also know with young people that people learn in education and at work. As you can see with youth, both people in work and education are learning higher. But we know that this neat group, not in education or work, are actually losing skills. And why is this important of specific youth? Because if we look at somebody at the end of the grade, at the end of this line, who's 25, if they're 25 in 2011, they probably have about, or could very likely have 50 years in the workplace. Who knows, on the labor force, who knows what would 50 years look like? If you're already having low levels of skills at a young age, how are you going to be able to participate as the economy changes, jobs change, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? So it's really important of having people engage in education and work, because losing skills can actually catch you in a skills deficit where you can perpetually be stuck, because if you have less skills, you can't participate in education, you can't participate in work, and it's almost a perpetual motion where you get stuck, or huge populations could get stuck. So the early findings of PIAAC, and this is kind of the most important thing, is that there's really little to believe that PIAAC test results have shown improvement versus PISA, versus IELTS and other previous skills surveys. So we know that the dials haven't moved over the last 10 years, because IELTS was taking place in 2003, it's 2013. That over a 10-year period, we haven't improved skill levels. We know that low skills relate to an economic disadvantage. They relate to a social disadvantage. If you don't use them, you lose them. We know about the youth. We also know that adults who've never used the internet or computer are more likely to have low levels of skills. We also know that adults with low levels of skills are much less likely to use the computer frequently. We also know that adults who have not completed upper secondary school are more likely to have a low level of foundational skills. We also know that about adults who haven't participated in post-secondary education have a lower level of skills. We also know, and the most important thing, that adults who have low levels of foundational skills are less likely to participate in education and training. So these are the people with the least, are the least likely to participate in education and training. And what some people or some researchers have been increasingly saying is that there's this bifurcation about people who have skills are learning more skills, and people with less they're losing them and having less. So we're creating this kind of polarized skills society. And this, we can, in the long run, it would be very hard to have, one section of the workforce increasingly learning new skills, having career opportunities, moving forward and advancing, while another segment kind of being caught in a perpetual skills deficit. So it's really important that we identify interventions or strategies, or really try to be innovative. How do we engage these people with low levels of foundational skills, who are least likely to participate in education and have a lot higher likelihood to be unemployed, to be on social assistance, and may have multiple barriers? Because we all know that getting somebody a job is kind of the first step to self-sustainability. So I would say that because this survey is so big, how do we utilize it as a tool for change? When PIAAC results become available, the relationship between literacy level, earnings, and workforce attachment will become clear. We'll understand what's happening in 2013, well, actually 2011 when the data was collected. But we also know that correlation is not causality. That simply just lifting up literacy levels and may not resolve all our problems. In the past, level 3 has been a kind of a very big issue. I recently went to a conference and then we had a large discussion on it, where there was a thing, if you don't have a level 3, you don't have the ability to participate in society. Right? We knew that in the previous survey, 42% of Canadians and 60% of Italians didn't have a level 3. Not having a level 3 doesn't mean that you can't participate in society or in the economy. It just means that you have a greater probability of having worse labor market relationships and poorer socioeconomic outcomes. We know that these people are more likely to be unemployed, that they're more likely to get caught in the skills deficit. And we also know there's a secular trend of people needing more skills than ever in this constantly evolving and changing economy and labor market. So I think that the good thing about PIAAC is it really brings all these conversations to the forefront. We'll be able to accurately see our skills against countries. We'll be able to see the relationship between literacy, numeracy, problem-solving in technology-rich environments, how they're utilized in the workplace, how they're spread out throughout the country. And it'll be able to really capture kind of how we compare against other countries, how we compare within provinces and against provinces. And it sets that kind of baseline data of, okay, where are we now and how do we move forward? And I like to say that, through this data, it helps us kind of ask questions about how can we purposely design programs to reflect the skills of this 21st century? How can we ensure that our most vulnerable populations gain the skills necessary for a changing society, for a changing economy? And how do we achieve greater impacts? How do we move the dial? I think, after 10 years of looking at IELTS or ALS and PIAAC, and that we've seen kind of no movement, it's important to say, how do we not get there in the next 10 years, right? How do we make sure, back to the analogy about the flip phone and the iPhone, in the next 10 years that we're not still in the flip phone condition, that we're actually using an iPhone, that we're moving forward in our lives? Because the world is changing and we have to make sure that our skills change. It's not that people have, somebody once said, it's not that people have less skills, it's just that the skills needed in society are much more today. So how do we stay relevant, right? How is everybody, and I think this is a shared responsibility. Right? Everybody has a role to play for creating a greater skill society where people can work and live to their fullest. And this data, it doesn't give us it won't paint a picture of everything, and there's multiple, I mean, when we look at people who are unemployed and have low skill levels, there's multiple barriers that many of them face, and there's multiple other things that are not covered in PIAAC. But it is an important place to start the conversation, see the skill levels, and bring this to the forefront, because really we live in a knowledge-based society. Understanding the way we use skills, understanding the skills for the future, understanding how certain populations are in a skills deficit or have a skills surplus, or how they're using them at work. is really important. And now that, in 2000, I guess in October, we'll be able to gather this new data and really see a reflection of how skills are in Canada, skills portraits in Canada. It's a starting point where we can begin this conversation and move the dial on these things. So that, yeah, in 2000, what would it be? 2020, 2023, that we have higher skill levels. I think that's about it. I probably rushed through this way too quickly, but if anybody has any questions or things, please feel free to respond on the webinar.
Okay. Yeah, so if you want to ask a question, you can ask in that little question pane there, and I'll be sure to ask it. Or if you have a microphone or something like that and you want to try raising your hand, we can put you on the audio as well. But I do encourage you to ask some questions in the question pane here, since we do have a little bit of time. Ron, very quickly and easily as you can you explain what level 3 is?
What level 3 is? I wouldn't be able to. The OECD has a very good, I would say, very good description of each levels and what are the kind of competencies that each level would demonstrate. They have one for literacy, which is now document use and prose, one for numeracy. So they have level definitions. I would actually have to bring up the definition and explain it. But generally, traditionally, we've kind of seen level 3 as the cutoff between you have the skills or you have the ability to learn how to learn. That's what most people assume, that once you're at a level 3, you possess that as kind of foundational skills where you have the ability to learn how to learn. So that's kind of the most important thing, as things move, that you have the basic, foundational skills, again, to learn how to learn. And at the when we talk about that level 1, if you're not even a level 1, you don't even have the basic reading and writing skills to start reading. It's almost that classic definition of illiteracy.
Okay, perfect. I have another question here. Could you please explain more about youth NEETs and skills lost over time?
So NEETs are basically ages 16 to 29, and a lot of governments are increasingly concerned about this age cohort because this is the labor force of the future. These people, and increasingly in this kind of technology age or this knowledge-based society, these people are going to have, on average, 10 careers. They're going to be in the workforce for 50 years or working till they're 80. And if they don't have those foundational skills or have high level of skills, how would they be able to, move as the times change? So actually, we're going to actually do, Essential Skills Ontario is actually investigating a lot into this age group because we think it's a really interesting age group. A lot of them are actually men, which is quite interesting because in this, we've seen, and we're going to actually do more work on this, is that men are the people, it seems like, we're struggling with this knowledge-based society. They're the ones having poor scores on literacy tests, poor educational attainment rates, higher dropout rates, and are more likely to be on social assistance or be unemployed. And with, what was the other question, Allison? There's the NEETs, and then there's the...
I think they would like you to speak a little bit more between that and skills lost over time.
So skills lost over time, there's a notion of skills atrophy. So basically, it's like any other, it's like going to the gym. You have to use skills. So even if you have a university degree, you might actually, if you're not using those skills frequently, you can lose them. I mean, I remember learning all kinds of math formulas when I was in high school, or calculus. If you brought me to solve these things, I wouldn't know how to solve them, right? So you have to actually practice them. And what we're seeing is that people in kind of, let's say, higher level jobs or these kind of critical analytical jobs are using their skills and maintain those skills. While if you had a university degree but you didn't kind of use those skills in the workforce, they would slowly start diminishing. So it's really important that people have that kind of, they keep up with their skills or they improve them, because you really don't know what skills will be needed in the future. And there's this notion in economics where they talk about, perfect market equilibrium, or there can't be a perfect skills equilibrium. It'd actually be better almost to have some people with a skills surplus, because, they'll be more flexible as the labor market changes because they have more skills to be adaptable. You won't be able to get a perfect match between skills, but people in the skills deficit, that's kind of a real worrying trend, because if you're already in a skills deficit and things move upskill, like your job upskills, or you try to get a promotion, or you try to move to another career where the skills demands are higher, you might find it difficulty to land one of those jobs or to stay in the labor market.
Okay, a few more questions here. How does this apply to community-based people that do not have employment goals?
That's a difficult question, but I would say that if we look at problem-solving in technology-rich environments, increasingly, more and more elements of our daily lives are involved online. People have to fill out forms online. They have to use a cell phone. Just the basic interactions are all moving online, and problem-solving is such a critical element. I mean, we live in a world where, this kind of rote learning. I remember when I studied, memorize the periodic table and spell it correctly, or have all these kind of activities that it was just rote memorization. But we live in a society where I can Wikipedia anything. I have to actually solve problems. I have to apply this knowledge in a creative or analytical way. And everybody has to do this in some form or manner. And you need those actually basic, you first need you need those basic foundational skills to do this. So foundational skills increasingly become important, but foundational skills applied in technology-rich environments and problem solving are the basis.
Okay, another question. Is there any place in your analysis and in PIAAC documents that doesn't focus on the deficit model and focuses more positively on the accomplishment, more hopeful model? For example, people who have high skills are able to reach these goals that are beyond just employment attainment.
Well, that's, I think, where you look at, when you're looking at kind of socioeconomic data, right? They're looking at, when I went to that one slide, I can even go back to it. It talks about this foundational skills and its relationship to health, to its relationship to volunteer for a charity or nonprofit organization. Your understanding of, if you have less skills, your understanding of the political issues in the country would be less. Has a poor understanding of general trust. So if you look across the line, it has effects employment and social disadvantage. But we also know that employment, if you're in employment, you're actually increasing your skills. So it's working, actually you're learning while you're working. And that's why it's such a crucial element for most adults, because either you're in school or you're working, or if you're not in that, you're probably losing skills.
Okay. IELTS numbers in Canada did not include surveys of those in prison or Aboriginal people to any degree. Did the PIAAC study include these groups?
So I don't know about prison populations, but definitely when you talk about Aboriginal populations, that's the kind of, those are one of the groups. If we go back to this slide, is the federal HRSDC has made a concerted effort, and many provinces, to oversample Aboriginal populations so we can understand their skill levels and their relationship to employment, etc., because they feel that this is very important information. So we'll be able to gather that data at very kind of micro levels.
Sorry, Ron, my thing's a little slow. Okay. What is the next step for assessors in adult learning organizations? Will there be an assessment that we will administer?
Well, that's where I was getting to about PIAAC Online. PIAAC Online is in a norming period, so they're actually testing it right now, because to take a survey and then bring it to an assessment is a difficult process. So ETS, Educational Testing Services, one of the largest assessment developers in the world, is actually participating with the OECD to develop PIAAC Online. So recently, MTCU actually handed out free numbers, or free numbers, so that you could actually test the beta version out. So they're projecting the beta version out to be out sometime next year in the summer, but I don't know more about details. But you could definitely test the trial version of PIAAC Online. And I think other people who are designing assessments are very cognizant of the changes in PIAAC and will slowly incorporate these elements into their diagnostic tools.
Okay, where is the data from the chart social skills and social disadvantages from?
That's from the OECD. I think it's Better Work, Better Lives, Better Society. I forget the actual name, but it's in a couple documents.
Okay, and I think some people are asking, I have someone here asking for the online link. I'm not sure what they're asking for. Maybe if you could, if that person could follow up with specifically with what online link they would like, then we can do that in a follow-up email. is there a list of questions, tests, and their potential responses that will be available for planning, data, warehouse, work with this survey set? If not, when is it expected, please? I'm not sure.
I'm not sure, but I'm sure that what I can tell you about the OECD is that they are really embracing an open data initiative. So most people will be able to go onto the OECD website, and for a low price, they'll be able to actually access those data sets. So researchers all over the world will be able to use those data sets and manipulate them to come with their own findings and conclusions. And in terms of the test items, those will be most likely on PIAAC online. I don't know where you would see them. I know that there was a book on the OECD that talked about each component and how they're doing it, and they have every kind of component about how they actually go about testing it. But I don't know about the actual questions, if there's a bank of them publicly available.
What will to follow with that, I guess, what is access to the data going to be like once it comes out?
Again, it's going to be open, right? So the feds are producing, the federal HRSDC and Statistics Canada, I think it's a multi-government ministerial initiative. They're going to produce a couple PIAAC documents on one. They're going to have for provincial ones, they're going to have a federal analysis, and then they're going to have actually reports on specific groups. And then the other is that OECD will allow people all over the world to purchase the data sets for I think a very reasonable cost. So you could actually go online and click on Canada and then start pulling down tabs and putting on Excel sheets and looking at the data yourself.
Okay, great. Now that person asked for the PIAAC survey for the online link. What we'll do is we'll just send a few links in a follow-up email with the links to OECD and some more information as well. That looks like it's all of our questions. I'm sorry if I missed anyone. I think I got most of it here. Oh, wait. I have one more question here. Has there been any consideration for how learning disabilities impact on the acquisition of skills used at work? What percentage of bottom-level performers are in that category?
That is a question I don't know. I think it may be included, it may not. I don't know if they actually. I think learning disabilities are very hard to define, and I don't know because it would have to be a self-report. So I don't know if that segment of the population is included. So then I don't know how. I don't know if they don't have a specific kind of breakdown for that population. Then I don't know how it would be for the skills utilized at work. But certainly, if you look at second language learners or Aboriginals, we'll be able to see the skills, how they utilize them at work, if they're different than other populations. Right? We'll be seeing risk in immigrants, how youth use them at work, what kind of skills they're using. There's a lot of data there, and it's very rich. So, researchers like me are probably going to be combing it for the next couple of years and writing reports, and there's going to be it's almost endless what you can do with this kind of information. So it's like, again, this tool, this survey, and the data from it, it's really basically like taking that Nokia flip phone and then putting an iPhone next to it. Again, to bring it back to the beginning, it's a really ambitious and brave endeavor.
Okay, and I also have a comment to help answer that question from another participant here, but there were no accommodations made for learning disabilities, but Canada added some questions in the demographic section.
Okay.
So, good to know. Perfect. Okay, so I think that's it for questions today, and if you have more questions or want to know more about PIAAC, you can go to our Preparing for PIAAC section on our website, where this webinar will also be posted. And Ron, you can always get in touch with him, Ron at essentialskillsontario.ca. I'm going to throw your email out there again, Ron. So,
thank you, everybody, for participating.
Yes, thank you, Ron, and thank you, everyone. And we will be following up very soon. Thank you.